right, my friends, David Parsons here. Welcome to News Trap for the first week of June 2023. I hope you're doing well. Man, we are under attack here at Nostalgia Trap. I feel like I'm going to be hosting a stand-up comedy special that has a cover with me like with duct tape over my mouth. It says like silenced or canceled or something like that, because I don't know if you saw me tweet about this, but YouTube is fucking with Nostalgia Trap. They've been putting strikes on our videos saying that we are advocating violence and conspiracy theories, and at this point they tell me if I get another strike, they're going to delete my channel and I won't be able to post anymore. At this point, my YouTube channel, the Nostalgia Trap YouTube channel, is under suspension, so I can't even do my live stream with Justin Rogers Cooper this Friday, which sucks, but we're going to be putting up stuff and recording anyway, and putting stuff up on the Patreon page, which honestly seems like the safest place for me to post stuff anymore, because Patreon never takes my shit down, never gives me copyright strikes, certainly doesn't accuse me of advocating conspiracy theories and violence, which is fucking insane. If you've listened to our podcast for years, you know that we are sort of, historians and political people who are analyzing what's going on. And really, to me, one of the chief things we do on Nostalgia Trap is diagnose the violence that's latent in the system everywhere. Social violence, racial violence, gendered violence that's sort of built into the American way of life. And I know that's sort of a crispy way of putting it, but it just seems insane that we're being basically accused of being harassment, terrorism, that sort of thing. And YouTube is couching it all in this policy of Pizzagate and the Capitol January 6th riot, and saying, we got to be careful with disinformation and the kinds of things that we're putting out there, and YouTube is going to be very strict now about what they're allowing. But what this effectively means is I'm not able to post Nostalgia Trap stuff on YouTube anymore, which is a major way to reach people and to reach an audience. So as much as we've all been watching this sort of censorship, free speech, cancel culture sort of discussion play out on these digital platforms, Nostalgia Trap is now sucked into this as a victim of it. I don't know what this means, but to me, it means that I'm going to be much more present on the Patreon page, and that's where you're going to find a lot of the Nostalgia Trap stuff. So if you want to come by, actually, Patreon has a new deal right now. They've never done this before. I'm very happy that you can do a free trial. You can just sort of sign up and enjoy Nostalgia Trap stuff for 7 days for free. So if you want to do that, now is the time to do it, because I feel like Patreon is a platform, for whatever reason. Maybe it's because it doesn't go out to the wider public. They aren't doing this sort of censorship shit. But anyway, it's weird, because the clip that they actually flagged was Justin and I a couple weeks ago talking about this sort of idea of people like Daniel Ellsberg or Martin Luther King Jr. or even Timothy McVeigh, Americans who considered themselves patriots, sort of answering a higher call than American law, the American legal system, the U.S. Constitution. That's the clip that they flagged, that they took down, and that they said was advocating violence and conspiracy theories. I don't know. It's pretty fucking absurd, and I'm trying not to be paranoid and feeling like I'm in some sort of dystopian, Kafka-esque nightmare of totalitarian state censorship, because this is YouTube that's doing this. And, it's funny because Justin and I have been talking lately about how much we love the YouTube algorithm and how it gives us such warm feelings on all those music videos we watch and talk about on the show. But now I'm like, fuck, they're not going to let me on YouTube anymore, man. So, I don't know. It's hard because Justin and I were talking about well, is it us? Were we talking in a reckless way? But it's insane. What is out there? There are dudes that have very popular platforms talking about genocide on trans people. And is their shit get taken down, or is it just Nostalgia Trap? I really don't know. But it feels weird to have our shit being accused of this when all I see online is just trash calls for violence and conspiracy theory everywhere. So I don't know, whatever. I'll stop talking about our Lenny Bruce censorship battles. But if you want to find us, Patreon is the place where I put everything up. So that's a link you can hit in the episode description, I guess. Thank you for those who are joining our Nostalgia Trap private feed where we can be free. I want to share some screenshots. The screenshots have been coming hot and heavy lately with me and Justin and Andrew sort of sharing some of the shit that's going on. There's a lot, and so I actually want to just sort of give you a few quick highlights of the things that we've been talking about on the Nostalgia Trap back channel. One of them is this really insightful and kind of terrifying interview with a homeless and housing activist named Paul. I think his name is Paul Roden. Paul Bowden. That's Boden. It's in the Guardian. I'll link it in the episode description so you can read the interview yourself. This guy's been working, starting in San Francisco and in cities around the United States, around the world, with housing policies and homelessness. And you can imagine that he's reached a point of how do you not lose your mind in working in working with these cities and trying to address this problem that seems like nobody really honestly wants to address. And so this is just like kind of a great quick capsule history of why homelessness and the unhoused population is such a problem, and why it's getting worse. So there's this great little history here, and I want to read a quick bit of this. The question is, what did public housing look like before the 80s? What happened to change the direction? So, he's basically saying that there was a moment where there was more of a social safety net. So here's what Paul Bowden has to say. He says, the federal department that we now call Housing and Urban Development, HUD, was created in 1937 in response to massive homelessness following the Great Depression. The enabling legislation said the government has the responsibility to ensure that all of its citizens have a clean, safe, decent place to live that they can afford. But in 1998, the legislation was changed to say the federal government cannot be held accountable to ensure that even a majority of its citizens have a place to live. The federal government said, oh, no, we're not responsible. We relieved ourselves of this responsibility. In 1994 and 95, the Hope 6 program under Bill Clinton that aimed to rebuild public housing tore down a lot of public housing and made it mixed income. California Senator and former San Francisco Mayor Dianne Feinstein introduced legislation that overturned the law that said that if the government destroys a unit of federal housing, it is legally required to replace that unit. Then in the late 90s came welfare reform, imposing all kinds of caps and limits on aid to poor families. 300,000 people were cut off from Social Security benefits in a single day because they were labeled as dual diagnosed, having mental illness coupled with drug dependency. And you could no longer get Social Security if part of your disability was a drug addiction. So it was the dismantling of all these different systems, your housing system, your welfare system, your disability system. At the time, we were also wiping out halfway houses and lodges for mentally ill people. Then you wonder why all these different folks, whose main thing in common is living in poverty, ended up out on your streets. So he's got this really kind of turn in this interview where the interviewer asks, what's going on now? What are the current trends? And he says this, and this is, I thought, kind of the money quote of this interview. He says, in the 40 years I've been doing this in 13 cities that we work in, I have never seen so much vitriol coming from neighborhood associations, business groups, civic groups, and tech groups saying these people need to go. Those groups are saying, we've been looking at this homelessness for 40 years and we're sick of it. We don't want to see it anymore. We've had nonprofits telling us they're going to fix it. We've had people running for mayor saying they're going to make it disappear. And we have a federal government that says you can't hold us accountable for the fact that homelessness even exists anymore. People seem to be saying, if I don't see poor people, then I don't have to worry that there's too much poverty in America. If I don't see homeless people, I don't have to worry that we have a homeless problem, because if I don't see it, it's not a problem. So this is something we've talked about a lot on Nostalgia Trap over the years. It's a fundamental fact of growing up in the United States to kind of encounter, to me, a really cruel and dehumanizing discourse about homeless people coming from everybody, not just like Trump conservatives and really cruel people, but liberals too, maybe liberals especially. I grew up in the suburbs, which people were terrified of the dregs coming from Los Angeles and being on our streets. It's always, from LA. They're always from somewhere else. The basic fact of it is the dehumanization, though, and you see that really starkly in the Jordan Neely case. The response to that, the fact that it's like a quote unquote like legitimate take to be like, the guy deserved to get choked to death because he was just like bothering people on the subway. It's like, well, the kind of a very common attitude is just like, well, what did you expect normal people to do? We're all sick of seeing this, we're all sick of this population. And, that to me, the fact that this activist and this guy that's been working on this for 40 years is saying, look, there's a lot of hatred out there, and we're kind of at the end of our rope in terms of policy. People have the system has given up, and this has been a process that's been going on for decades, but is now reaching as we're heading into this sort of like weird financial crisis that I think is really just an extension of 2008, and we just keep going into it. To me, the population is just going to get bigger, and so like there is a weird itch in the middle class population, who I think are the ones that are most vitriolic about hating homeless people. There is an itch for a final solution. They want to put all these people in prison or launch them to the moon or put them on the bottom of the ocean or whatever. There is a kind of genocidal feeling, and that's why, like, I talk about violence, and the violence latent in the system. A fucking homeless dude is choked to death on the train, and it's something we talk about, whether that was right or wrong. I mean, that to me, there is a kind of break there. There is a kind of new moment in some ways to me, in terms of the right wing, especially sort of making an explicit argument for public executions without trials. The Kyle Rittenhouse thing, the Jordan Neely thing. Trayvon Martin. It goes on, but the idea of like standing your ground or self-defense against people who aren't even armed is incredibly frightening to me, because they are trying to worm their way into like a legal argument that allows them to kill the people they want to kill. Trans people, groomers, left-wing people, Black Lives Matter activists, run them over in your car, shoot them, and have the governor of Texas argue for your pardon. That's where we're at. And that, to me, the fact that violence has an extension into the state and has people in the state like Greg Abbott in Texas who are willing to speak to this population and act on behalf of this population legally is a precedent that is really, really fucking scary, honestly. So check out that article about homelessness in The Guardian. I thought it had a good take on it, because the dude knows what he's talking about in terms of how much policies have changed. And he says at the end, like, look, we need to bring back the 1937 original legislation. He says, actually, this is the quote: "The federal government needs to be held accountable to find affordable housing for the poorest people in this country. No waiting list, no intakes. We don't care where you were born. We don't care if you've ever gone to jail. We don't care who lives in your house. You're eligible. You've just got to fund it. The idea is to create units that are mixed income, that are spread across the city, that are habitable, and that poor people can afford to live in." And the Guardian interviewer says, "That's a tall order." And Paul Bowden says, "Yeah, it's a tall order, but it's a restructuring of a society that's gone so far off kilter that the idea that people even merit a decent place to live, regardless of their income, is more foreign to us now than it was in 1937. It's like you're still trying to rearrange the chairs on the deck of the Titanic, and you hit the iceberg 40 years ago." So again, when you see these tent cities and populations of homeless people everywhere, try to hold in your mind that this is the bottom dropping out of American society, and it's something that's been done with intent. These are expendable human beings, and we've talked about that category. You almost don't even become a human being when you're expendable like that. And that, to include like drug addiction, mental illness, it's such a fucking awful tragedy. And to me, to add the kind of like the hatred and violence that like a majority of the U.S. population seems to aim at these people is just, it's too much to take. So there's, all of this has to do with housing. And we're talking about the people at the bottom of the American economy, but let's talk about those middle class folks. Let's talk about those young people who are going to college and trying to make it, because there was an article in the New York Times last week about cities and about the sort of like creative class and the people that are trying to join the middle class in America, the people that Obama is following on his working documentary, which we'll continue to look at with Justin over these weeks. But what's happening with those folks? So the reality, and this is what the article is about in the Times, is that they aren't winding up in the big cities like San Francisco or Los Angeles or even Chicago. Instead, it's like these smaller cities where people can afford to live, but they oftentimes have jobs that are like paying them in New York, but they like live in Phoenix or some other place. In other words, there's like a lopsidedness to the trends here. And here's a couple great clips from this piece. People fleeing these pricey big cities often move to other large cities that are a bit more affordable, like Phoenix, Denver, and Austin, as well as Sacramento and Riverside. Many of these cities have recently developed some of the amenities you would associate with a place the size of New York or Los Angeles, like diverse restaurant scenes and revitalized downtowns. This trend extends beyond California. The analysis finds that a growing number of college graduates were moving out of the nation's 12 most expensive metropolitan areas, which include New York City, Chicago, and Seattle. Affordability has eroded so much in these places, the analysis suggests, that some of the most educated, highly paid workers don't want to stay. Jim Dalrymple left Los Angeles when he reached that costly life stage, when the smallest, cheapest house he said he and his wife could find in the city was no longer big enough to fit children. "I love LA. I thought we would stay there indefinitely. I miss it still," said Mr. Dalrymple, a 41-year-old writer. When he and his wife concluded that they couldn't afford to stay, they moved in 2019 to a much larger home within walking distance of downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. He recalled the abundant jobs and affordable housing that attracted his schoolteacher grandparents to Southern California 2 generations before he left. "I would love to take advantage of all that myself," he said. "It's not available to us, and it's not available to a lot of people." Some describe frustration that even people who've followed typical routes to success, get a degree, save up money, work your way up to better paying jobs, still struggle to live comfortably in coastal metros. "The threshold is just so high," Eduardo Lero, 45, said of the income required to get by in New York. He was a public school teacher in the city, then recently became a higher paid consultant who could live elsewhere. In 2021, he moved home to the Minneapolis area. "This is about choice. Who has choices?" says Abigail Wozniak, who directs the Opportunity and Inclusive Growth Institute at the Minneapolis Fed. "That means," she said, "that we have to understand what goes into the choices visible in this data to recognize what choices are closed to other people. Like the teacher who might like to move to California but can't afford to and never does. Or the nursing assistant who won't make it in New York because even an entrepreneur can't. I had these dreams about opening a business," said Laura Newman, 33, who wanted to own her own bar in her native New York City. "I really wanted to pursue those dreams, and it didn't matter how much money I saved because the cost of achieving those goals increased as I was saving money." And so she moved to Birmingham, Alabama in 2017 and opened her first bar there instead. So this is a great article and has a lot of really, really intense charts and graphs and data on these trends. But it's kind of incredible to me, and it's very recognizable, this idea of like moving somewhere where you can afford, hoping it's a tolerable place in one way or another. But these cities, big cities like New York, which is a place I lived for 15 years, and a place I think about a lot because I visit there, I have family there. I'm connected to New York, and obviously that's where Justin is too, and so many of my friends. And so the watching what's happened in New York City, and connecting it to pandemic and realizing it's not just pandemic; these are part of larger economic trends. But the work from home thing has shaken things up among the class of people that I think I'm around a lot. Like academics, media people that are trying to make it in industries that are shaking up very quickly, but there's still opportunity. But it's it means moving somewhere that maybe you don't want to move. Choice. What is choice? Who has choices? Who doesn't have choices? Those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in. That kind of social reality is compounded by the economic part of it, but also, climate change. We're sitting here, me and Claudia, when we moved to California, which is, we're in my hometown. I was raised here. When we moved here years ago, the wildfires were happening. The Thomas Fire happened in 2017, right when we moved here, and we thought, holy shit, like climate change is what's going to make us move, because I can't sit here and wait for the town to burn down and smell this smoke, and the like poison air is just like, when you're breathing air like that, believe me, if you've ever been in a place with a chemical spill or wildfires or anything like that, if it smells bad where you live, you want to get the fuck out because you're breathing that shit in. And that made us panic. But what's weird is that we thought, well, maybe we should go back to New York. But like right now as we speak, and I don't have screenshots about this, I just know because I saw it this morning, there are wildfires in Canada that are sending smoke and smoke smell and air pollution into New York, and people in New York and Brooklyn and Jersey are like smelling the fire there. So like what deep irony I would feel if I had packed my shit up from California and said, get me the fuck away from these fires. I'm going back to New York, and there are fires there too. So, the climate change element of it is intense. Here's a quick clip from our favorite, the Financial Times. It says, global heating will drive billions of people out of the climate niche in which humanity has flourished for millennia. A study has estimated exposing them to unprecedented temperatures and extreme weather. The world is on track for 2.7 degrees Celsius of heating. With current action plans, this would mean 2 billion people experiencing average annual temperatures above 29 degrees Celsius by 2030, a level at which very few communities have lived in the past. Up to 1 billion people could choose to migrate to cooler places, the scientists said, although those areas remaining within the climate niche would still experience more frequent heat waves and droughts. And that's something that I'm like, okay, everyone is going to move out of India in the next 30 years. That to me alone is mind-boggling. I don't know what that fucking means. Obviously, it means a lot of border violence and a lot of fucking migrant camps and a lot of fucking nightmares. But it also means, people moving around and coming to the United States. You're like, okay, is the United States a safe place? I'm sitting here talking about like the wildfires I've encountered on both coasts at this point in these coastal metro cities that are like, the fires are creeping off in the distance. There is a notion that like there's not really anywhere that's safe, and none of this is predictable anyway. But you got to throw the climate change stuff in there with the whole idea of people moving around, and the people that have money moving around, and the people that don't have money moving around. And what are those two fucking experiences like? How are they different and the same? Let's do our highlights for children. Moving around with money and moving around if you're poor, and especially, I hear Justin's voice in my head right now, especially moving around if you don't have citizenship, if you don't have nationhood, if you don't have a nation and a state backing you, you are fucked. Thrown in the bottom of the ocean. Greek government was caught last week throwing migrants into a raft and just shooting them off into the middle of the ocean. Fuck you. Right? You don't fit here. So if you don't fit into a nation, I mean, God help you. And I feel like homeless people in America don't fit into the nation. They're not only no longer human beings, they're even worse. They're no longer Americans. So they're not afforded a certain kind of respect and humanity and protection. Right? That part of it is another Ominous sign. So let's talk about some of the bad guys. Who are the bad guys? Who do we go after? Well, fuck, man. The left likes to go after like cops and landlords and shit like that. There's certainly, certainly those are visible enemies, visible sort of branches of state violence. But let's talk a little bit about housing some more. I'm reading about these apartment units that are going up and the people that are making money out of them. The landlords, like landlord, property owner, capital investor, however you want to put that. These people that are making money off of housing right now, it's low because it's. I mean, to me, it's been a low kind of moral position for a long time. But right now, you've got this rent thing happening where it's like everything's $5,000, $3,000, $5,000 a month for like a 2-bedroom apartment. I mean, it seems fucking impossible. And the fact that these dudes are like just like Wolf of Wall Street guys that are like, make money, keep fucking doing it, fuck the tenants over. It does make you kind of feel fucking insane. So here's a little clip. This is another Times article about these dudes that own these properties. After meeting Gajavelli, Sinha agreed to invest $75,000 in a 706-unit apartment complex called Reserve at Westwood in southwest Houston. The complex was selling for $76 million, and Gajavelli told investors that with rent increases, they could more than double their money in 3 to 5 years. High demand for affordable housing and a limited supply meant working-class renters had few options, Gajavelli told investors. Unfortunately, they don't have good credit. They don't have down payments to buy the home, he said in a webinar for prospective investors last year. They live in apartments forever. One of Sumrock's mentors, Grant Cardone, a former car salesman from Louisiana turned syndicator, has amassed 4.3 million Instagram followers, and his company bought $618 million worth of apartments in 2019. In one December 2020 presentation, Cardone tells the audience that making only $400,000 a year is embarrassing. My plane eats $2.7 million a year, bro, he said. Cardone didn't respond to a request for comment. And here's the kicker to the story. A video for prospective Apple's Way investors that was posted in December 2021 featured the 704-unit Houston apartment complex called Timber Ridge. Apple's Way, Gajavelli's company, bought the complex that month for $56.7 million with plans to more than double investor returns by raising rents and adding tenant fees for washing machines and covered carports. The investor video showed a tidy complex of apartments arranged around a shimmering swimming pool. By summer 2022, the pool water had turned a sickly green. High piles of trash littered the parking lot. Tenants complained to city officials about rats, mold, illegal evictions, and the failure of management to properly maintain the buildings. Kim Alexander, the former asset manager of Apple's Way, said Gajavelli refused to buy new air conditioning units when old ones broke down. Alexander said she ferried working AC units from vacant apartments to ones where families with children were living without air conditioning. So that's some fucked up evil shit. You've got this guy Gajavelli. I'm like, where is he? Let's find him. Why isn't he in fucking prison? Why isn't he publicly canceled? Why are we talking about J.K. Rowling? We should be talking about this Gajavelli guy who's a crooked motherfucker making tons of fucking money, bragging about, oh, my fucking plane eats $2.7 million a year, bro. And that making $400,000 a year is fucking embarrassing, bro. At the same time, he's making these fucking buildings, raising the rent, and bragging about the fact that poor people are going to be stuck in apartments forever because of guys like me who are going to make it fucking impossible for them to ever have any dignified housing, right? This is the bottom line. Like, the fact that our society sucks because Wolf of Wall Street type dudes are laughing at us and getting their dick sucked while they're doing it makes me fucking insane. And I better slow down or else I'm going to get kicked off my platforms again. But God, that shit is fucking unbelievable, right? I mean, that's just rage fuel. When I read shit like that, I'm just like, okay, I understand why things are fucked, because people like that have power and are able to just keep doing it. And now we have a system that's empowered them so much that they're so far ahead of us in terms of how much capital they have. None of us can ever hope to touch them. And they're in the political system. They're making the laws. Okay. Let me talk about Las Vegas real quick and just share a couple more quick things with you before we go. Las Vegas, is a place that I'm still cruising through the Vegas history on the Nostalgia Trap Patreon page, doing those episodes, and I'll have more of those Vegas history episodes this summer. But Vegas is a city that's alive right now, and there are things going on. So I want to just dip into it really quickly, because what's happened in Vegas since the pandemic, I think, reflects a lot of the trends we're talking about here, which is sort of a leaving behind and a dropping off of the bottom of the lower classes, the people that don't fit. Vegas, there was always a place for the down and out, right? There's always been a sense that you could go gamble in the casino, even if you were an ordinary person. That's been changing. And I think that's part of what I'm saying, is that there's a trend of if you can't pay anymore, fuck you. There's no place for you anymore. And we're not going to even have a sense that that's the kind of society we want to build. We want to build a society that's closed off, that's gated, that's safe, that's for the people that have the money to pay. So here's a little bit of what's going on in Las Vegas. This is from the LA Times. Casinos on the Vegas Strip are making it costlier to play and harder to win. Payouts are lower for winning blackjack hands. Bets on some roulette wheels are riskier, and it's taking more cash to play at mini game tables. Blackjack players lost nearly $1 billion to casinos on the Strip last year, the second highest loss on record after 2007, according to data from the Nevada Gaming Control Board. Some Las Vegas casinos cut back the number of blackjack tables with dealers, raised minimum bets during busy times, and lifted their advantage over players in some games, doubling down on a pre-pandemic practice of making subtle changes that favor the house, according to industry executives, researchers, and gamblers. You're bringing in higher value customers, and we're already full, Caesars Entertainment chief executive Tom Reeg said on a call with Wall Street analysts this month. So you're kicking out the lowest end. I see no reason that needs to stop or would stop. In addition to smaller winnings, visitors are also paying more to visit Las Vegas. Prices for everything from hotel rooms to concerts to restaurants have surged in recent years. So far, tourists haven't been deterred. Las Vegas Strip casinos took in nearly $8.3 billion in gambling revenue last year, a record that exceeded pre-pandemic revenue by more than 25%, according to state regulators. In 2022, the number of visitors to Las Vegas fell short of 2019 levels, but tourists last year still spent money at record-setting levels, according to tourism officials. Casino executives, and here's the coda, we always have a coda. Casino executives say labor costs make table games expensive to operate, making the lower-priced bets more difficult to offer. Casinos are also offering fewer opportunities to play at a table. Last year, Strip casinos had about 1,090 blackjack tables, down about 19% from a decade ago, state records show. So all of that is sort of depressing, because part of the reason I've always appreciated Las Vegas is there is a kind of equalizing element to it, in the sense that an ordinary person can sit down at a blackjack table and play cards with the high rollers. All of that is shifted and is shifting into this sense of fuck the people that don't have any money. We don't need you. We don't need your money. We don't need you at our casinos. We don't need you going to our hotels and restaurants. We actually have a fewer amount of people coming here, but they're spending more money, and that's what we want. So in other words, there's this feeling of again, who gives a fuck about the people on the bottom? They can fuck off. And that part of it, to me, is new in some way, in terms of, obviously it's the oldest story in America and the oldest story in terms of class, but it's one that is, it's a disturbing, weird trend, because it's very anti-populist to me. It's super elitist, the idea that, again, we're not going to offer the kind of basic stuff to people, and the experience of life in America is becoming so expensive that we're just going to close the doors. And the idea to me of that the Caesars Entertainment chief executive Tom Reeg talking to Wall Street analysts, that quote, "You're bringing in higher value customers and we're already full, so you're kicking out the lowest end, and I see no reason that needs to stop or would stop." So, quote, "Kicking out the lowest end and fuck it, it doesn't matter because we're making more money than ever." That's what's fucking, that's the logic of capital, finding a kind of a twist in the logic. I don't know. I wonder what you guys think about that. I know I'm sitting here talking about Vegas and our ability to play blackjack, but, as goes Vegas, as goes American capitalism to me. It's an important barometer, and watching Vegas turn into like just, fuck it, man, we'll just be all luxury and all only for rich people is disturbing, and it's a loss. And I'm also like, well, it's labor, right? It's all labor. It's because they don't want to pay dealers to deal blackjack hands for $5 to poor people. They don't give a fuck about that anymore. They'll have those people playing on video games, phones. You can do that. You don't get the experience of being with a dealer. You don't get the nice experience anymore. And fuck you, go get a job and get some money if you want to come back and sit at a table. All right. Labor, right? It's the labor cost. And this is, I thought, this is a quote from a few years ago, but this is a really fucked up quote from an analyst for Citibank, Kevin Chrissy, in a note to clients when American Airlines announced pay raises for pilots and flight attendants. The investor class said the following. Kevin Chrissy from Citibank said, "This is frustrating. Labor is being paid first again. Shareholders get leftovers." That's unbelievable. That attitude is the root of it, right? Like, labor, how dare they get paid? The money should go to shareholders first. Shareholders shouldn't get leftovers. You know who should get leftovers? Labor, the people that do the work. I mean, to me, it is like, that's a perfect quote for demonstrating how capitalism sort of flips the whole labor theory of value on its head completely. And fuck Kevin Chrissy, whoever that guy is. Motherfucker. Okay. So that's where we're at. That's the logic of capital in 2023. And it feels like, if there's a theme from today, it feels like a bottom is dropping out, but there's also a kind of sick, ugly, sort of violent feeling coming out underneath that I think is partly, maybe it's a guilt reaction. You got to justify hurting these people. You got to justify the fact that you're seeing suffering people everywhere, and your attitude is fuck them. So, I think liberals and conservatives come to their attitudes in different ways, but in a lot of ways, they're both sort of having to justify something, having to say, this is why this exists. And we know why it exists. It's policy. It's state policy. I mean, if the state changed its policies to restrain capital, we could solve our homeless problem. But I wonder if we'll see that happen. What I do think we'll see happen is this population growing and a deeper and deeper sense from the public that they want something done about it, but nothing along the lines of like actually building, subsidized housing and all that kind of stuff. Instead, we're entering the time of the wolf, and the Jordan Neely case feels like a kind of beastly moment for revealing what people really feel about the people that are ruining our cities, etc. Okay, that's enough for me this week. If you want to check out all of our stuff, it's all on Nostalgia Trap Patreon page. You can hit that link in the episode description. I put most of these News Trap episodes where I sort of wrap up the stuff we're all talking about. I put these on the Patreon mostly, but I'm putting this one up on the main feed because I want everyone who listens to Nostalgia Trap, whether you subscribe or not, to know that, our stuff is going to be more and more on the Patreon page. Just in a practical way, I need to be able to put content up that's not going to cancel out my platforms and they're going to delete my YouTube channel. I know this is a fucking stupid thing to talk about, so I'll quit talking about it, but it fucking sucks to me, it's one thing about the whole like losing the YouTube channel, whatever. I'll start another one. Nostalgia Trap will survive. But the idea that, me and Justin being accused of like advocating violence and conspiracy theories, it hurts our feelings. We're allied against that shit. I mean, if anything, then we're trying to figure out a path and navigate a path through that stuff. So for our platforms to be taken down and the legacy of Nostalgia Trap on YouTube is going to be like, this channel has been deleted for advocating violence and conspiracy theories, is just so fucking disappointing, because we've been working hard on this podcast and all this Nostalgia Trap shit for years, and our hearts are in it. And fuck the algorithms, man. The robots are going to take it away, and I'm not even going to get a chance to appeal. You're going to be imagine talking to a judge that's an AI. Imagine pleading for your life. I mean, that's what's in the future for, migrants, criminals, homeless people going before judges, is going before a fucking robot judge and begging for your life to the AI. Woo! The future's beautiful. Thank you, folks. I appreciate it. We'll be back soon. Talk to you later. Enjoy your week. Bye-bye.